MLB the Show has had 3 years since the last World Baseball Classic to get a WBC mode in both Road to the Show and franchise. And today, I'm going to give y'all a $10 million idea for free as to how you could have put it in the game. And I don't think it's really that difficult in terms of the idea. I'm not a coder, so I couldn't tell you how to code that in the game, but I feel like there was a way you could have gotten it done. Welcome back to State of the Franchise Gaming and the Franchise Ain't Dead podcast. We are discussing the WBC, especially considering it's going to be starting up very soon. One of the more exciting parts of a major league season, though we only get it every 3 years. Putting it in the game would add another element to spring training and roster management as opposed to just skipping by it, which is something I frequently do in franchises that I play on the channel. We're going to begin with how this could work in Road to the Show. I don't think it'd be too difficult in terms of, sure, you're going to have to get your licenses down for certain stadiums, though if I am not mistaken, in this 2026 version, you have all the stadiums because 2 of them are Major League Parks. The other one, you got the license to the Tokyo Dome, even though it is in Pro Yakuyu Spirits, the Japanese baseball game that came out about a year and a half ago, and the stadium in Puerto Rico, which has been there for a very long time. I believe, if I am not mistaken, the Nationals played some of their games there at one point when they were in the transition from going from Montreal to Washington, D.C. So number one, extend the license out to just every year it is in the game, because the WBC, while it may not happen every single year, your Road to the Show player can be a part of it. And I think that would be dope to see, especially if your player is not from the US. Being as you start your Road to the Show journey in high school and then eventually venture off to college and then the minor leagues, you'd have to play with the timeline a little bit. But typically the year before, and maybe the year even before that, so 1 to 2 years before the WBC tournament, there are qualifiers for each of the 20 teams you see on the screen. Australia, Canada, Cuba, Czech Republic, Dominican Republic, Great Britain, Israel, Italy, Japan, Mexico, the Netherlands, Panama, Puerto Rico, South Korea, the United States, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Chinese Taipei, Colombia, and Brazil. Now, I would not exclusively restrict it to just players from those countries, as in the game there are over 50 different countries represented, so you could kind of fudge this a little bit for your Road to the Show player to participate, if you choose to do so. And that would almost take the shape of a small, like, showcase tournament, like what you used to do in some of the older MLB the Show games. Again, this would be outside of the regular season. It would give you something to do in the off season, and then once the regular season starts or spring training starts, you can go to spring training if your team is eliminated or participating in the World Baseball Classic is not something you are choosing to do. Now, as we know, on some of these rosters, it can get pretty dicey in a sense as to how a player is, considered to be a part of a country's team, as they go with not just your parental lineage, but also your grandparents' lineage. So that's why you'll see players that you may not think, wait, they're not from there, but either A, the place that they have come from or a family member has come from as either has been colonized at one point or is a territory of another country, and there's still that that tie to one another. So again, you can play with this to make it work in some way. Just like how, if I am not mistaken, Alex Rodriguez played in the first WBC, I believe, for Team Puerto Rico, and then the next one that came up in 06 or 09, he played for the US. So that could be something that you toggle as far as which country or countries you would like to participate in the WBC for. with the WBC in Road to the Show, you would get an idea as to what some of the international players who are on the come up are throughout, the world. Some of them you will see in the minors, some of them you'll see at the majors. And while this isn't franchise, and this is something I would probably want to see more so in franchise, it almost would play like a bit of a scouting trip for you, particularly if this isn't franchise. But for Road to the Show, it's just your player. You're playing against some of the other players across the league. And I know you're not going to be able to get the licenses for players who are not in the majors and not in the minors, but still are participating. So I think it's pretty simple. Just generate these players. You already generate them for the draft. Just generate some more, for some of these World Baseball Classic teams. Some of these teams, like, say, the Czech Republic, they may not have the best of players sitting in the league, but you could give them a player or two. A team that is more likely to be more dominant, say, Dominican Republic, as there are so many players from there. You're going to get players from major leagues. You're going to get them from AAA and AA to really fill out the roster. And, you just go out there and play against them. I think that would be absolutely dope. Now, for franchise, as I mentioned, this would be almost like a mini scouting thing. You can play with an entire team if you choose to. You should be able to choose whatever team you want to play with. Or if you are, not going to play at all in franchise, which is completely understandable, as the Major League season is already 162 games. Spring training tacks on about 30 more. And then there's the postseason. So you got almost 200 games to play. You can send your scouts there and they can get an idea of what players are, doing throughout the WBC tournament. The WBC tournament could also act as a bit of a momentum boost for players that are playing well in said tournament. So when they jump into the regular season and rejoin their major league staffs, they could be players that are on fire. Maybe they're, on a hot streak. Maybe they're on a cold streak. And it can really ramp things up and, have our franchises have a different dynamic from what, we've been so used to for over 20 years. Of course, for franchise, it goes without saying that without having international free agency in any way, this won't exactly work. I don't think in the upcoming CBA we are going to get an international draft, though we are closer than we have been over the last 20 years. Back in 2006, it was something that was mentioned to be a thing, and owners and players couldn't come to an agreement. The last I heard back in 2021 was they came very close to having that being signed, but the big issue were the Latin markets and how, let's be real, MLB teams exploit the hell out of those players coming from, Latin America. They don't pay them a ton, or they pay them enough for the countries that they are in, as the US dollar is worth more here than in most of those places, except Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico is a part of the US and they use, the same currency. But again, if you can generate players for the draft and just slide them in there as you've done for the last 20 years, you can generate those same players, pull them out of the draft, unless they have played in a college setting, which is something that some players have done. Javier Baez is the last one that I know of off the top of my head that, he lived in Puerto Rico, moved to Florida for one of his siblings. They needed a surgery, and they got that done. He played, I believe, high school ball, and then eventually got drafted. Players like that could be an exception to not being in the draft. So Japanese players, for the most part, they can be signed so we can have our own franchises versions of a Shohei Ohtani. They played several years over in the NPB. They come over mid-20s, late 20s, maybe even early 30s, like Tomoyuki Sugano, who is now a Colorado Rocky after playing with the Baltimore Orioles last year in his first major league season. I want more players like that. And again, they don't just have to come from Japan. There are players who have defected from places like Cuba, played the Mexican League, signed as a free agent, with a major league team, and they've had solid careers. Aroldis Chapman is one. He defected from Cuba, I want to say back in 2007. And then the Cincinnati Reds signed him, I believe, in 2008. And then they had him called up, I believe, sometime around 2009, 2010. He was originally going to be a starter, and then they converted him to being a closer. And over the last 15 plus years, that is what he has done. He has been a closer. He's been one of the better ones in the league, even despite all the BS he is, been dealing with in his personal life, and it's bled over into some of his playing career, particularly with the Yankees. But it is what it is. But Sony San Diego, it's February 20th as of the time of this recording. You have 3 more years to get this into the game. I will give y'all that time, but I have given you $10 million at least worth of game for free. Thank y'all for listening to the Franchise Ain't Dead podcast. I'll holler at y'all later. Peace out.